Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grave Shift podcast with Tony Trujillo. I am your host, and today we're going to be talking about The Conjuring. So, The Conjuring is a 2013 film directed by James Wan, written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. Now, let's get right down to brass tacks. The Conjuring is the perfect example of a great horror film. I love horror films. I'm very biased. It's my favorite genre. But even then, I'm still picky, and I got to admit, The Conjuring is, without a doubt, one of the best horror films today. You know, I've seen plenty of horror films, and not a lot really scare me. I haven't seen one that's scary since The Blair Witch Project, but this one is definitely on top. I'll go as far as saying that this film is probably one of the better films, especially in the franchise that it has created. For those of you that don't know, The Conjuring is now a giant franchise, as I mentioned earlier. Don't really know offhand how many movies they have, but I know there's plenty of spin-offs, as well as a third Conjuring film that was just released, hence why I would like to do this review so I can get you guys prepared for The Conjuring 3, which came out today, or The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, I believe is the actual name. Anyway, let's start with the beginning. Let me give you guys a quick summary. So, without getting too into detail about fact versus fiction and the novel this film is based off of, the film is essentially about a family that moves into a dilapidated home in Rhode Island in 1971. Right off the bat, shit starts happening. We got demonic forces that are antagonizing the family and torturing them, and at one point, the mother and the family decides to go to Ed and Lorraine Warren, who happen to be the famous paranormal investigators of their time, including as now in today's society, almost everyone knows who they are because of these films. But anyway, they are well known in their field, so she goes to them for help. When they do show up, they realize and they can confirm that there is demonic forces in the home that are attacking the family. Now, what I really like about this film is that Ed and Lorraine Warren are played by Vera Farmiga, I believe I'm saying that right, and Patrick Wilson. Two really good actors. This is probably one of their better films. They've been in many things before this, but to me, this is definitely the film that makes them stand out more. They play the characters so well. If you know anything about Ed and Lorraine Warren, which I did because I grew up studying their work, especially the Amityville case and on, I thought that their portrayal of them was perfect. It couldn't have been more spot on. Another thing I like is the family, as played by big-time actors Ron Livingston. Some of you might know him from Office Space. And then the mother is Lily Taylor. I'm pretty sure you all know who that is. She's been in many things. One thing I can say I really like with her is The Haunting, which is a semi-adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House. Anyway, moving on with that. I love these two actors as well. I think they play the characters very well. I mean, they're pretty supportive in their role. There's really no other way to put it except for they're believable. You don't really feel a dull moment in this film, especially with them. It's believable that they're husband and wife, even though it looks like they don't go together. And the the children in the film are also amazing as well. I mean, you can really feel the tension between all of them. You can tell that this house really is haunted, and there are things out to get this family. You can just feel the emotion in these actors that play these characters. It's all completely real. I mean, like I said earlier, there really is never a dull moment. What I love is that everything starts to happen right away. Now, if we're going to go into fact versus fiction, I couldn't tell you much about the real story behind this. I do know that, as I had stated earlier, Ed and Lorraine Warren were very famous for their case files, diving into many different occult and demonic cases, possessions, if you will. This story in particular, I do know that it's based off of a case file from Ed and Lorraine Warren, but even deeper than that, there was a series of books called House of Darkness, House of Light by Andrea Perron, who is a character in the film that's based on a real person that had lived in that home with her family, the Perron family, which is where we get some of the inspiration. According to, and this is in her words, her books were not adapted into a film because they were just a little too worried about how it would play out and that it would be too graphic and too terrifying. And by they, I mean the studio that made the film. So what the studio did was they decided to go with a case file from Ed and Lorraine Warren, which essentially is the same thing. It's just not based off the books. One thing I do know as well that is laid out between the fact and the fiction of the film is, in the film, Ed and Lorraine Warren show up almost immediately when things start happening to the family. Whereas, I've read the books, but In the books that the family's based off of, those events take place over time, and they live in the house, within a span of 10 years. Ed and Lorraine Warren do show up. Eventually, they help the family, yes, but even after they leave, the family still experiences hauntings and possessions of sorts. Again, I don't know a whole lot about the fact and fiction aspect of the film, but what I do know is this film is fucking awesome, especially the cinematography. I don't know if you're a geek like me, but I love the way films look. This one in particular, I love the way that it seems like even though it's 1971, it still is very gritty, very dark, and almost dilapidated like the home they move into. I mean, it gives it a better touch. It feels all the more scary. It definitely feels like a family that is on a farm in the middle of nowhere dealing with demonic forces in their home. It's just 100% believable. There are some gripes I do have about the film, of course, that I would like to discuss. One of those is just the length. This film feels very short. That's something I'm going to say. Yes, I'm really biased and picky with horror films, but this one, for how great it is really, really short, and I wish it was longer. Another issue I have is some of the lighting in the film is really annoying. It could be during the day and they're in the kitchen, and there's this one scene in particular where Ed and Lorraine Warren are sitting with, I always forget their names. We'll just say Lily Taylor and Ron Livingston's character. Basically, they're sitting there and, they're talking to the Warrens, and it is in the middle of the day. The lighting ends up going dark. And I think this may have something to do with a presentation of what it is they're dealing with. Maybe it's some sort of symbolism that I'm missing. I don't know 100% about it, but I just know that it really annoys me that the lighting changes a lot. I think the last thing that bothers me the most about this film is that the pacing is a little off. It seems like the film jumps around a little bit with pacing. It could be slow for 2 minutes and then boom, something terrible happens. It's like there's really never a consistent moment. It kind of seems like things are just out of order, but the story is still told really well. I mean, I can definitely forgive that. If I were to give the film a rating, I'd say this is definitely a 4-star film. Again, that's just my rating. I really do believe this is one of the better horror films in the last 10, 20 years maybe. I grew up watching horror films. Nothing has ever scared me as much as The Blair Witch Project and Poltergeist, the original film, but this film definitely scared the shit out of me. I remember seeing it opening day with my wife, and I had a hard time sleeping that night. We'll just put it that way. Something I did forget to mention, actually, that really gets my attention is the fact that in this film, you kind of see how they use a lot of the horror aspects to scare you, and that's what gives you the R rating, because this isn't a movie where there's blood and guts everywhere or language. It's just so terrifying that it's rated R. That's a big thing that stands out for me. And in regards to how scary it is, it's almost an example of what a horror film should be. And what I mean by that is you don't have a lot of jump scares. This film does not rely on jump scares. And if you know anything about the director, James Wan, you'll know that he is fucking immaculate. This guy has directed everything from Saw, Insidious. This is his playground. So you're going to enjoy this film regardless. But I love that there's just no jump scares. Like, there's a few here and there, yes, but they're not cliched. And that's what I think is great about this film is James Wan does not rely on cliched jump scares to freak you out. It's just in the moment, something's happening, you get uncomfortable, and then bam, it's full-fledged in front of you, and you're just like, oh, what the hell do I do? But honestly, guys, if you can see at least one of the films in the whole Conjuring universe, this is definitely the one. I'm a little picky in the sense that I think that the second one is a whole lot better in terms of story, but if I had to name one of them king, this is definitely the one. And that's just how it works out too. Usually the first film in any franchise is the best film. But even if you're not a fan of horror, definitely check this film out. I mean, you don't really have to go looking into the background behind it. I don't know if you believe in the story or not. I mean, me personally, I am a believer in the paranormal. I am a big believer in demonic possessions and the devil. So, I mean, a part of me does want to believe this is a real story, but I'm also a person that likes to investigate truth versus, lies. I'm not going to get too into my opinion on this. I do believe it's a great work of fiction, and there's definitely a story behind it, but if you can put that aside and just watch the film, I think you'd very much enjoy it. I know it's kind of short, and I didn't have too much to put in there. I mean, not a whole lot I can say except for the analysis of the characters. I chose not to do an analysis on the characters because I didn't want to spoil too much, and I really don't want to spoil too much of the plot. What I can really tell you is that this is an original horror film with a more modern story to it. It's your average family moves into a house, it's haunted, we need help from the guy, but the guy happens to be Ed and Lorraine Warren. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you're the person that likes films that don't rely on jump scares. I know I keep going back to that, I absolutely fucking hate jump scares. Most films have them, I can't stand it, so that's one of the biggest reasons I was drawn into this film. Like I said, guys, I'm going to give this one a 4-star, and that's just my rating. That's how my system's going to work on this. I would say maybe 3 stars, but I think it's just more deserving of 4-star because of the fact that you got a bunch of big-name actors. Cinematography is amazing. Everything is, to me, it's pretty pristine. Every film has its faults, but this one, I wouldn't say there's very many. It's pretty good for what it is, too. It's a horror film, yes, but it's almost too good for what it is. Guys, I don't know if you've seen The Conjuring yet. If you haven't, you definitely need to. I'm pretty sure you can find it on Netflix, Hulu, or wherever videos, you can tell my age is showing, wherever movies are sold. Get The Conjuring, check it out. Let me know what you thought. And please, if you could, reach out to me and let me know what you would like me to rate and review, whether it's a film, book, anything in the horror terror genre. Thanks, guys, for listening. I will see you next Friday.